of wisdom. Glean from that. While you're turning, here's a couple of upcoming announcements. This Saturday at 1 p.m. will be our first Seedline International Work Day. Are you available to come and help us to build Bibles at Seedline International? Seedline International is located on Highway 40 on the far side of Brazil, not too far from Great Dane, Brazil. Actually, just kind of catty corner to the north and to the east of there. 1 p.m. from 3 p.m. Be assembling Bibles. Brother Kermit is leading this new ministry up. This is something we've done before, but we're trying to do it more regularly. So please pray about attending. Sign up if you are interested in going this Saturday from 1 to 3. On the 7th, Ladies Bible Study right here at the church at 4 p.m. And we still have several books available. The ladies are going through a series by a lady named Francie Taylor. And every lady gets a book. It's not too late to join. This is a New Testament case study. I think you're on week 3. Does that sound right? So this week is a lesson on Mary and Martha and sudden loss from John chapter 11, verses 1 through 3. That would be the death of Lazarus. 4 p.m. on the 7th, right here at the church, Ladies Bible Study. Great time to get involved. Never too late to get involved. Feel free to bring a friend. On the 9th, our anniversary Sunday, 10 years here at Vision Baptist Church. We're going to have a Fuel Saver Sunday that day, so there will be no evening service. There will be a baptism service after the meal. So be prepared for that. And then the next day, we're going right to camp. And so please pray about that. We'll be gone from the 10th through the 14th at the Bill Rice Ranch with the teenagers. If you should be warned, if you will, on the 12th, while we are gone, there will be no Wednesday evening service that evening. So no Wednesday evening service on the 12th at 7 p.m. We will see you that following Sunday. All right, thank you so much. Here we go. Proverbs chapter 20 and verse 22, 23 and 24. Today, we are really dealing on things as always, but even more so specifically today, it feels like we're dealing with a lesson of faith in these 3 Proverbs. Really, do we trust God in these areas? Do we trust God in His Word, in His systems when it comes to these certain thoughts? Or do we take matters into our own hands? That's usually what we're facing, but even so, very much here. Verse 22 says, "Say not thou." Don't say this. Then he says, "I will recompense evil. But wait on the Lord, and He shall save thee." So the first proverb is dealing with, do we trust God in the area of what? Well, we have a word for it. The word recompense can be viewed as the word revenge. Oh boy, good old revenge. Injustice takes place. Somebody wrongs us in some form or fashion. Maybe they cut us off on the highway. Maybe they were driving too close to your bumper. I don't know. Has anybody else noticed this? Maybe I'm just becoming a more of a grandpa driver. No offense to the grandpas out there. But I feel like everybody's on my tail all the time. Does anybody feel like people are driving closer to your bumper, or is it just me? It feels like every day, whenever I'm driving the church van specifically, and it says Vision Baptist Church, somebody is on my tail trying to drive into my tailpipe, and I just would love to give a little tap of the brake, all right? A little sweet revenge. And God says, don't say this. Don't say I'm going to recompense evil. You need to wait on the Lord, and He shall save thee. What is revenge? It is the action of inflicting hurt or harm on someone for an injury or a wrong suffered at their hands. Okay? Somebody hurts you. Get them back. That's what the world says. I saw a quote in the news over the past couple weeks that maybe you can guess where it came from, but the quote was, "Revenge is a dish best served cold." That is what the world says. Don't get mad, get even. The world says sometimes karma, that's what the world says, needs a little bit of help. I don't believe in karma. I do believe in sowing and reaping. But sometimes, we just need to help it along the way a little bit. And then some people say, well, success is the best revenge, which in itself is vengeful, a little passive aggressive. And the world always seeks to get revenge. God says, don't do it. Are we going to trust him in this realm, or are we going to take matters into our own hands? Look at Proverbs 24. Similar language, especially with the first three words. Verse 29 of Proverbs 24 says it a little bit different. Say not, I will do so to him as he hath done to me. I will render to the man according to his work. He hurt me, I will hurt him. She spoke about me, I will speak about her. God says, don't do that. All the way back in Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 35, I'll read it. It says, to me belongeth vengeance. This is God talking. To me belongeth vengeance and recompense. Their foot shall slide in due time. I'm going to get them. I'll take care of them for you. But you got to wait for me to do it at the right time. For the day of their calamity is at hand, and the things that shall come upon them make haste. Paul says in Thessalonians chapter 5 in verse 15, see that none render evil for evil unto any man, but every one follow that which is good, both among yourselves and to all men. So the Bible clearly says this, revenge is wrong. Even though it feels good in the moment, even though there's some sort of pleasure we can attain from it. I'm not going to deny the pleasure of plotting against somebody that's your enemy and getting them back, okay? There is obviously something alluring to that, and it really goes back to the simple idea of power and pride. God says don't do it. Why should I not get revenge when I have been wronged? Because God says don't. And if that's not enough for you, you are continuing the evil. If that's not enough for you, you're losing your moral ground by falling into the trap of doing that. If that's not good enough for you, it promotes focusing on negative thoughts that wrecks you on the inside. Those negative thoughts turn to negative emotions like bitterness. Nobody wants to be bitter, but it happens. And the anger, the hatred, the negativity that is involved with the revengeful mind is not healthy. Now, there are some things in the Bible that would cause us to question this sort of thing. I can think of a commandment right off the top of the head, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Pastor Dustin, what about the avenger of blood? Are you familiar with this law that was in the Bible? The avenger of blood had a specific role within the legal system of Moses. And he was authorized to pursue justice according to the laws of God. That if somebody killed a family member, the avenger of blood, which is in the Hebrew is the exact same phrasing as the kinsman redeemer. Same words. Kinsman, redeemer, avenger of blood, same thing, was allowed to pursue the wrong person who had killed a family member. And even within those parameters, there was still a thing called the cities of refuge designated for the person who had taken a life specifically by accident to be able to run to and hide and find sanctuary. And so he could have protection there. These cities of refuge were a legal mechanism of giving justice, fair treatment, and preventing blood feuds taking place. So, okay, what about the avenger of blood? He was allowed to go out and do that. He was allowed to have reign to, if somebody killed a family member, to go out and take justice into his own hands. How do you feel about that? Well, I think it really goes down to the word avenger versus the word revenge. What's the difference between the word avenge and revenge? There is a slight difference. While we use the words interchangeably sometimes today, the basic idea, an avenger is somebody who goes and seeks justice on behalf of someone else, not on behalf of themselves. So it's one thing for us to take justice into our hands for us. Someone hurt me. It's another thing for somebody to take justice for someone else and to take up for them. Now, what goes on in the avenger's heart is between them and the Lord. Most people that distribute justice are avengers. When a judge hands down a sentence to a criminal who has wronged somebody else, he is avenging them. He is not revenging, he is avenging. That's why we have in the legal system chances for, if there is connection between the judge and the criminal, that the judge will accuse himself. Because he's not supposed to be a revenger, he's supposed to be an avenger of justice. When it comes down to it, the main thing is God says you can avenge and you ought let others avenge. But when it comes to personal vendettas and personal revenge, don't do it. Wait on the Lord, and he shall save thee. How will he do that? Through his own means. Maybe that's through a judge. Maybe that's through a police officer. Maybe that's through another person. God will take care of the person that is doing wrong. Now, this is a lesson of faith. Do we trust God in this? Do we trust his word? Do we trust his system when it comes to the administering of justice? Or do we take things into our own hands? Verse 23. Divers weights are an abomination unto the Lord, and a false balance is not good. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time on this one because in verse number 10, I believe it is. Yes, verse 10 of this chapter, we've already seen similar wording and a similar proverb. In verse 10, it says, divers weights and divers measures, both of them are alike, are an abomination to the Lord. Really, there is not much difference here in these two verses, verse 10 and verse 23. The basic idea in verse number 10 is let a stone equal a stone's weight. They had a measuring system, a weighing system. Let a ephah, or a measurement, a bushel in our modern day, be a bushel. Don't take the weighting measurements, don't take the scales and tip them in your favor. Be honest with how you're doing business with people. And I use the illustration. If you're a butcher, don't leave your thumb on the scale as you're weighing out for the person you're slicing meat to try to get a couple extra dollars. Don't take advantage of people, is what it's saying. And the idea here is be honest and be fair in your dealings. We talked about this. And again, we come back to it in the realm of faith. Do we trust God? Do we trust his word? Do we trust his systems when it comes to specifically attaining what we need? Or do we feel we have to take matters into our own hands and cheat to get ahead? It's that simple. Every single one of the 10 commandments goes back to an issue of faith. Do I trust God in this realm? It's amazing. And when we sin, no matter what it is, whether it's revenge, whether it's stealing, whether it's lying, whether it's adultery, whether it's coveting, it all goes back to, do I believe God in this realm? Every single sin issue is a matter of faith. Now, sometimes when it comes to our provisions, having what we need, we struggle with that. We do not believe God can help us meet those needs. Sometimes when people steal, it's not about needs. It's about wants. And we want more things. And we don't trust God with fulfillment in our lives. Are we satisfied? Are we content? Or are we searching for more that we have to cut a couple corners when nobody's looking, be deceitful to get what we need? Are we honest? Are we fair? Do we let God take care of our business? Matters of faith. Verse 24. Here's a fun one. Man's goings are of the Lord. But how can a man then understand his own way? Oh, this is a philosophical question here. This is kind of an interesting thing. Look at it again. Man's goings are of the Lord. How can a man then understand his own way? I draw your attention to this because I think it's slightly important. Slightly important. Maybe it's more important than I think, but there are two times that the word man is used in this verse. And there are two different Hebrew words for the word man here. While it's just man for us, the first one is a word that means a warrior, a mighty man, if you will, a valiant man. And the second one, the second man in the second half, is where we get the word Adam from, which simply means a human being, has the idea of ruddy to it, which is dirt like, clay like, if you will. And so you have two different words to define the same word we have in English, man. Is that important? I think it slightly is. And if I could say it's important in this way, the first man, the first word there is referring to a man that is surrendered to God, a mighty man, a man of God, if you will. It can be used to describe a warrior, it can be used to describe a prophet, it can be used to describe someone generally that has yielded or surrendered himself to God. I definitely see a connection with the warriors. And while not every warrior that ever fought was a godly man, Joab was not. Most people that are fighting in wars have a very keen sense of their own mortality. And because of that keen sense of their own mortality, they are more apt to pray and walk with God. Not all of them. It's not a hard and fast rule. But I think that those that have been soldiers, that know that they could lose their life at any time during their campaigns in warfare, have a closer proximity to the Lord, and that potential is there. Now notice, a man's going, a person that is yielded to the Spirit, his goings are of the Lord. Now I think we can agree with that. When a person surrenders to the Lord, when they yield to Him, and I love the word yield because that's what you do when you get off the bypass. You yield, all right? That's what you do when you come around a curve. Clara's driving a lot, so I'm refreshing on these signs, all right? And so we yield to the traffic that is coming. And when you yield to the traffic, you allow the traffic to go. You allow the traffic to have first come, first serve basis, and you surrender to the traffic, okay? And that's what you do with the Lord. He is the one that always gets first place in our life. We look to Him. We yield to His direction. What He does, we follow. That person who surrenders to Him, his goings are of the Lord. Yeah, Psalm 37:23. I like how it says it this way. The steps of a good man, David said, are ordered by the Lord. And I think that's the idea. The man here in Proverbs 20, verse 24, is the good man in Psalm 37:23. The steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord, and He delighteth in His way. There's a very good chance that what David said inspired what Solomon said, in a sense. Obviously, both inspired of the Lord, but he's echoing what David was saying, who was echoing what God was saying. Just fascinating to see the connection there. Yeah, when you follow God, God's going to lead you to where you need to be at the right time. We all believe this. When you surrender to God, there are things that He is going to put in your life for a reason and put you where you need to be. That's why when a Christian walks with God and the traffic is a little bit slower than they like, or they get detoured or derailed from doing what they thought they were going to do, they should be okay with that, because who's in control? Is it my schedule or is it God's schedule? Is it my plans for the week or is it God's plans for the week? That's why the person who walks with the Lord ought to have a little bit more patience when things don't go their way. Now, do we always? No. All right. We all get frustrated when we plan something and we have to do it twice or three times, or something gets derailed or delayed. But when a yielded person surrenders to the Lord, his goings are of the Lord. Why does God have me in this doctor's office? Why does God have me at this mechanic shop? Why does God have me looking at this refrigerator repairman? Man's goings are of the Lord. If we surrender, can we not say this is God's will? If the fridge breaks down, is this not the Lord maybe opening up an opportunity? You need to learn how to see things that way. You need to learn how to see things not based upon your earthly motives, but on heavenly motives. That things don't happen on accident. There's a reason why things take place. Now, is God involved in every single little thing? Some would say yes, and some would say no. Is God involved in every blowing of the wind? Possibly. He may be, or he may not. We don't know. Maybe he just set it all in motion and he knows. But I think God can definitely use anything. God can use any blowing of the wind. God can use any flashing of the lightning. God can use any breaking down of something we think should be running right. The steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord, and he delighteth in his way. Jeremiah 10:23 says, O Lord, I know the way of man is not in himself. It is not in man that walketh to directeth his steps. God leads us when we surrender to the Lord exactly where we should be. Can I tell you a sad, tragic story, but that is just a God thing in my life? Many of you know the way my mother passed away. My mother was had her life taken by my father because my father experienced bipolar schizophrenia. Tragedy happened and just ultimately changed my life. And I have seen God use that situation in many situations in other people's lives. Can I give you an example of this? One time I was up at Union Hospital, and I was up there because one of my friends who I grew up with in high school that I used to skateboard with found himself in the ICU because he had mixed morphine and alcohol and literally fried his brain. And so I get wind of the family that is asking for me to come up. And so I go in and I meet the family and I see my friend who's laying there. I haven't seen him in years. He's laying there with all these things hooked up to his brain. He's out of it. He's a vegetable. They try this thing that they do when somebody goes brain dead where they cool the body, they warm them up again, and they see if there's any sort of activity that sparks. If there's not, then it's literally a pull the plug situation. Crazy situation. So I'm in there, and I get to meet my friend's father and stepmother face to face. Come to find out that the stepmother of this young man who's laying in this bed, that she used to give massage therapy to my mom, who was a cancer patient that accepted massage therapy for when she had bone cancer. And this lady loved my mom. They hit it off together. It was crazy. Just the connection that was right there. You're Sean Spittler's son, and it was just from there. Wow. And of course, everybody knows what happened in my family. And so she begins to ask me, what happened with your dad and your mom? And which I don't mind telling people. I'm not afraid to talk about it. So I was standing in the hall talking to this family and explaining the situation. Little did I know that the ICU nurse that was there that day comes up to us, and this is what the lady said. He said to the ICU nurse, he said, his dad killed his mom, and now he's a preacher, and God's using him. Isn't that crazy how God is doing this in his life? And as she said this to this nurse, she had this look on her face. I'll never forget it. A couple months later, after the passing of Eddie, after everything, the funeral, a couple months later, that same ICU nurse who the stepmom had talked to had her life taken by her husband. Murder-suicide in Terre Haute. I had the opportunity to do the funeral. Happened to be the aunt of one of my good friends. Get an opportunity to preach the gospel, and quite a few people trusted the Lord. What am I saying? I'm saying God can use anything if you yield to him. It is amazing what God can do. God can put anybody in the right place at the right time to preach his word and to do what's right. And so you just don't look at your days as like this is just a throwaway day. There is no throwaway day when somebody walks with the Lord. There is nobody that walks with God that God cannot use in a marvelous and miraculous way to see great things done. Now, look at the second half of this verse. And this is where the normal man is. How can a man then understand his own way? How can he get it? Now, there's two ways to look at this. You can look at this as the natural man. How can he understand his own way? Or you can also look at this as the spiritual man, just as a human. Even though we are yielded to God, how can we truly understand what God is doing? Can't. The unsurrendered person is lost and in confusion. 1 Corinthians 2:14 says, "The natural man receiveth not the things of the Spirit of God, for they are foolishness unto him. Neither can he know them, because they are spiritually discerned." There is an unknown factor when it comes to walking with the Lord, no matter if you're yielded or not. There truly is. We cannot see exactly, physically, what God is doing. Sometimes we just get breadcrumbs in certain places. And his ways are above our ways. His thoughts are above our thoughts. And truly we cannot know. And truly we will not understand a lot of what God is doing on this side of eternity. But still, the place where we need to be is yielded. Better to be yielded and have God leading than to be unyielded and us leading. We know where our mind and our ways will take us. Fruitlessness, spinning our tires, however you want to describe it. The main lesson here is one of faith. Do we trust God, His Word, and His systems when it comes to obtaining our purpose? Or do we just take matters into our own hands? Say not thou, I will recompense evil, but wait on the Lord, and He shall save thee. Divers weights are an abomination unto the Lord, and a false balance is not good. Man's goings are of the Lord. How can a man then understand his own ways? Do we trust God or not? Father, help us tonight to trust you in all of our ways. Lord, sometimes we want a revenge. Sometimes we want to cut corners and be dishonest. Sometimes we just want to feed our own flesh and go our own way. Help us to trust you no matter the situation and no matter the struggle. Lord, I praise your name for how you have used these people before me. I can think of story after story, how you have blessed every single person in here, how you've led and how you have guided. Help us to continue to be on your path and to truly live. The steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord. Order our steps even today, in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you for coming tonight. You are dismissed. See you Sunday.